So, I've held off posting this for a while, but honestly, I don't see any other way to let go of the anger. I'm not trying to drag anyone down, but some people need to realize that actions have consequences, even if it takes years. This is the story of how my best friend turned my life upside down and how I turned it right back on her. A friendship built on trust. I thought I'll call her Sasha, though that's not her real name. Sasha and I met in elementary school and were inseparable. She was the kind of friend who could make you laugh in any situation, who had your back when no one else did. People loved her. She was charming, bold, and confident. But looking back, there were early warning signs I chose to ignore. Growing up in a small town, we didn't have a lot of opportunities, but we made the most of it. We'd roam the fields, daring each other to sneak into the creepy, abandoned house by the river, staying up all night dreaming of the day we'd make it and get out of there. I wanted to be a journalist, to travel, dig up the truth, and bring justice. Sasha wanted to be a lawyer, the high-powered type, defending the big names in court. We even went to the same college, though she studied law, and I focused on journalism. We graduated, and she got a job at a prestigious law firm. I landed an internship at a top news agency that could open all the right doors. We stayed close, sharing updates and plans. I thought this was the beginning of our adult lives, exciting careers, big cities, new friends, and maybe even love interests. But life had other plans. The job that could change everything. After a few years of grinding, I finally got my first big break, an expose on a pharmaceutical company's corruption. The company, Meditrust Corp, had buried evidence of dangerous side effects linked to their best-selling drug. For me, this story was everything. It was the story that would define my career, make my name, and maybe even change lives. Sasha was thrilled for me. Well, at least that's how it seemed. She even offered to help. She claimed she had connections through her law firm that might be useful, and I trusted her implicitly. Why wouldn't I? We'd known each other since forever. She was like a sister, but things started getting strange. Everything starts falling apart. It was subtle at first, small inconveniences that were easy to shrug off. Sources would cancel interviews last minute. Files would go missing from my computer, or I'd get emails with the wrong attachments. Then came the leaks. Details from my story were mysteriously leaked before I could publish. This was more than just bad luck. My boss was understanding at first, but by the third incident, he wasn't so patient. One evening, I got a tip about a potential whistleblower within Meditrust. I arranged a meeting at a coffee shop, choosing a secluded corner booth. I waited and waited. No one showed up. When I checked my phone, there was an email from the whistleblower claiming they'd gotten cold feet. The next day, I found out my anonymous source had emailed Sasha instead. When I confronted her, she just laughed it off, calling it a silly mix-up. But this kept happening. My research was always one step behind, and just when I thought it couldn't get worse, my boss called me into his office. The crushing blow. He looked at me with this tired, disappointed expression. I can still hear his words. "We can't keep covering for you. Meditrust has lawyers breathing down our necks, and every piece of evidence you've given us has fallen apart." I tried explaining the mysterious leaks and how my sources kept vanishing, but I sounded crazy. I sounded like a paranoid conspiracy theorist. The agency let me go, and just like that, my big break was over. It was months before I could even look for work in journalism again. I felt like a ghost in my own life, a shadow of who I'd been. And that's when I started putting things together. The realization. One night, in a haze of self-pity, I looked back at all the times Sasha had been involved. Every major incident, every leak, every missing file, she'd been around. Slowly, it started to make sense. Sasha was sabotaging me. But why? Jealousy? Malice? Or was it something even deeper? I didn't know, but I was done playing the fool. The confrontation. I waited until she invited me over for drinks one weekend, acting like everything was fine. She seemed so casual, like none of this had affected me. Finally, after a few hours, I just asked her outright, "Sasha, were you trying to ruin my career?" She laughed like it was some big joke. "Oh, don't be dramatic," she said, swirling her wine glass. But her eyes had that glint I'd seen only a few times before, like when she'd spread rumors in high school or manipulated people for her own amusement. Then she dropped her guard, a little too much. "You just don't get it, do you?" she said, almost mockingly. "You're just ordinary, and you don't even realize it. But now, at least, you know your place." It hit me like a slap to the face. Sasha saw me as a stepping stone, someone to hold down to elevate herself. All those years of friendship were a game to her, a way to feel superior. I walked out without another word, my head buzzing with rage and hurt. The plan. I decided that if she wanted to play games, I'd play one of my own. I remembered her dark secrets, the kind she buried deep. No one knew Sasha the way I did, and I knew things that could ruin her. For weeks, I dug through old emails, messages, and documents. Turns out, Sasha had been playing dirty in more places than just our friendship. She had been involved in her firm's ethically questionable cases and had even tampered with evidence to win. And one of her darkest secrets? She'd once confessed, in a drunken stupor, to fabricating evidence in a case she'd won. I reached out to a few reporters and gave them everything I had: emails, timestamps, confession recordings. They ran with the story, and it blew up. Her law firm suspended her, and her reputation was trashed. The aftermath. The last I heard, she's been trying to rebuild, but in our field, your name means everything. There's no coming back from a scandal like that. And me, I moved on, far away from that toxic friendship. I found work in a smaller agency where I'm slowly rebuilding my career. So, yeah, maybe this was revenge, but it's more than that. It's about finally closing a chapter that should have ended years ago. After I exposed Sasha, I thought I'd feel free, like a weight had been lifted. And for a while, it felt that way. I walked away from our friendship, from everything we'd ever shared, without regret. I thought it was over. But things didn't end as cleanly as I expected. Ghosts of a friendship weeks turned into months, and life went on. The story I leaked about Sasha had gone viral, and her name was tainted across the industry. I'd see headlines about her and hear whispers through connections that her suspension had become permanent. No one wanted to hire her. She'd been blacklisted in the legal world. All her aspirations, her career, her plans, gone. For a while, it was satisfying to see her suffer the same way she'd made me suffer. But after a few months, satisfaction turned into something else, a gnawing emptiness. She'd been my best friend since we were kids, and now I couldn't shake the memories of the good times, the ones before everything went wrong. I kept seeing her face, hearing her voice. Every time I saw someone who looked remotely like her, my stomach would twist in guilt. I started wondering if I'd gone too far. Second-guessing my revenge. One day, I got an anonymous message. "Did you think you'd get away with ruining my life?" I knew instantly it was Sasha, but she didn't follow up with any specifics or threats, and a strange part of me wanted to reply. I even typed out a message before deleting it, over and over again. Then, something strange happened. I got a call from a reporter at a mid-level news outlet who said she wanted to do a piece on the whistleblower journalist who brought down a corrupt lawyer. She'd somehow pieced together that I'd been involved in Sasha's downfall. It was tempting to say yes, to be recognized for exposing Sasha's lies. But something inside me hesitated. I didn't want my name to be out there for this. This was personal, and it was done. I turned down the interview, though part of me still wanted to know if Sasha knew it was me. Would she come after me? An unexpected letter. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. There was no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was Sasha's. My hands shook as I opened it, unsure of what I was about to read. "I know it was you," the letter began. "I didn't want to believe it at first, but it all adds up. You used everything I told you in confidence, twisted it against me. We were best friends, closer than sisters, and you betrayed me." The words stung, but I read on. "You ruined my life, but I'm not done with you yet. You think you're safe, but you're not. I'm going to make sure you lose everything, just like I did." The letter ended with a line that made my heart race. "Watch your back, because the next move is mine." For the first time since everything happened, I felt genuinely afraid. The paranoia sets. In after that letter, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I'd get home from work, I'd check the locks on my door, double-check my windows, and peer into the shadows of my apartment. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for Sasha to make her move. My nights were plagued with dreams of her appearing out of nowhere, confronting me, accusing me. The thrill of revenge was gone, replaced by a cold, creeping anxiety that I couldn't escape. The worst part? I still didn't know what she'd do. Would she go public with her side of the story? Start a smear campaign against me? Or worse? I tried to tell myself it was just an empty threat, that Sasha had no way of coming after me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she had a plan, a job offer, and a warning. Amidst all this, I got an email from an editor at a respectable online publication. He'd read some of my earlier work and wanted me to join their investigative team. It was an opportunity I'd dreamed of since leaving my old job, a chance to finally move on and start fresh. I was ecstatic and threw myself into preparing for the interview, hoping this new job could finally be the fresh start I needed. But the night before the interview, I got another letter. This one was short, just a few lines, but they were enough to make my blood run cold. Heard you got an interview lined up. Better think carefully about that. If you think I'm going to let you waltz into a new job after what you did to me, you're sorely mistaken. I spent the rest of the night in a panic. Did Sasha know my every move? Was she somehow intercepting my emails, stalking me? I thought about canceling the interview, afraid she'd sabotage me again, but something inside me snapped. No, I wasn't going to let her intimidate me any longer. This was my chance to rebuild, and I wasn't going to let her take it from me. A new chapter, or so I thought. The interview went well, and I got the job. It felt like the first real victory I'd had in ages. For a few blissful weeks, I managed to settle into a routine and feel like myself again. Sasha's letters stopped, and for a while, I let myself believe that maybe she'd given up, moved on with her life. But that peace didn't last. One evening, I came home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart dropped. I hadn't left it that way. I cautiously stepped inside, and the sight that greeted me made my blood turn to ice. Everything in my apartment had been ransacked, drawers pulled out, papers scattered everywhere, furniture overturned. But what really got me was what was taped to my bathroom mirror, a photograph of Sasha and me from years ago, taken during our first year of college. Across the photo, in red ink, she'd written, "Remember this? Good times, right?" My hands shook as I called the police, but without any proof of who had done this, there wasn't much they could do. All I knew was that Sasha had made good on her promise. She'd come after me. Desperation sets. In the next few weeks were a blur of paranoia and exhaustion. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on work. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, expecting another threat. My boss noticed my lack of focus and pulled me aside, expressing concern. I was on the brink of losing everything I'd worked for once again, all because of her. But I wasn't about to let Sasha win. I decided to fight back, legally this time. I reached out to a lawyer, gathering all the letters, messages, and even the photo from my apartment. I filed a restraining order against her, hoping that would finally be enough to keep her at bay. The final confrontation. The restraining order seemed to work, at least for a while. I didn't hear from Sasha, didn't see any new threats. Slowly, I started to breathe easier, but just when I thought I was finally safe, I got an unexpected call. It was from a former colleague of Sasha's, someone I'd never met but who knew me through mutual contacts. He said he wanted to meet, that he had something important to tell me. Reluctantly, I agreed. When we met, he looked nervous, glancing around like he expected someone to be watching. He leaned in close and whispered, "I think Sasha's planning something bigger than you realize. She's been obsessed with you ever since you exposed her, and she's found someone willing to help her." Apparently, Sasha had convinced one of her old clients, a particularly nasty one with connections, to help her get even. He didn't know the details, but he warned me to be careful, that Sasha was desperate and would do whatever it took to get revenge. The realization. The gravity of it all sank in. This wasn't just a feud between former friends anymore. This was something darker, something dangerous. Sasha wasn't going to stop until she'd destroyed me completely, or until I fought back. I decided that if she wanted to drag me into the depths with her, I wasn't going alone. I contacted every media outlet I knew, every person I could think of who'd take the story. I laid everything bare, the sabotage, the threats, the break-in, everything. I wanted the world to know who Sasha really was, so she'd never be able to hurt me or anyone else again. The story spread, and soon people were calling her out, realizing just how far she'd fallen. I heard she left the city, moving to who knows where. Maybe she's still plotting her revenge, waiting to strike when I least expect it. Or maybe, just maybe, I've finally outrun her. Either way, I'm prepared.